it was just great being back in India. That was a highlight. It was a highlight seeing, you know, different craftspeople at work. It was a highlight being in the Calico Museum. So no, I cannot give you a highlight. My name is Hodson. I'm someone who has something of a passion for India. So at various times, excuses I've found to take me back there. I did think that maybe I should, in fact, not embark on this journey because I really want to go to Madagascar and I'd like to see a little bit more of Europe. But the more I pondered it, I thought, yes, this is what I would like to do. I would like to see a lot more about India, its craftspeople, its the initiatives that are being taken, the developmental opportunities that there are, and this fitted the bill. Well, I wasn't quite sure how it might pan out, but I came home and it exceeded all expectations. I enjoyed immensely the company that it provided, the opportunities to stay in an array of different accommodations, each with their own story, their own history, each with their different foods, different service, all of which were great quality. And from sleeping under canvas to sleeping in a palace, to sleeping in heritage hotels and the great Eastern Hotel in Calcutta. I mean, it was a great adventure in that sense. And the variety was tremendous, and I appreciate the attention that was paid in organising the journey, so that this was an aspect of it. The
travelling through Gujarat.
No, that was wonderful. I mean, you know, to get away. Well, it wasn't just getting away from the big cities, because in that journey, not only did we go into the rural areas and far north, it was taking us on to the edge of the Thar Desert and the salt marshes, etc. But it also it was a touch of reality too, in that we progressed at night, and it highlighted, in fact, the extraordinary industry that is being undertaken, and understandable in a country of a population of 1.2 billion, or maybe in excess of that, and that was grounding, because that is also India. India is more than just the amazing pictures and colourful pictures that one sees in magazines, and that it's more than just the poverty in some of the cities and even in the rural areas itself. It's a hugely diverse country, and you know, one has to be open-minded and be respectful of the opportunities that travel can offer to actually explore and to understand it's not a small, it's a large corner of the world, but coming from a small corner that we do, and venturing forth makes it a particularly, well, for me, it made it a rewarding journey. We had the good fortune to be travelling in a variety of ways, from planes, both internationally and in internal flights, magnificent airport in Mumbai, which, you know, would have been wonderful to have seen more of, to see the change from Dum Dum's airport and what Calcutta now offers, to arrive in Delhi and not to be besieged by touts and things like that, as had been in past years. Roads were as varied as the people were, and that was another part of the, you know, both the experience, the charm, and the realism of what is India. The focus, I particularly appreciated the focus, which was looking at ways in which textiles were being produced, but in the context from field to fashion. And fashion in India is just extraordinary. Little do people appreciate, I think, the wealth of creativity, coupled with a portion of a community that does have the wherewithal
Yeah.
to nurture and to foster that. But at the heart of it all really was to see the real artisans and skilled people at work, but also to see their commitment in resurrecting perhaps and enabling crafts to be restored to what they were, and also the commitment that many of these folk had to upskilling people locally, but also taking that necessary strategic step to actually ensure that traditional design would be retained but reinterpreted so that a much larger market gained value from it. And what one was very aware of was this extraordinary commitment that people had to it, that the benefits were being enjoyed across numerous sectors of the community, and that was quite marked. From the village, the schoolgirl popping in on her way home to collect some material that her mother would be working on back in the village in tie-dyeing, to see that indigo dyeing has not been lost, and the skills that are involved in producing that, to see that there are certain divisions of labour that still exist, but there is overlapping increasingly occurring. The impact that partition historically had on India, and the way in which some of those abrupt cuts have been are being overcome, and that there is a restoration of the muslin industry, that the nomadic peoples of Gujarat, that their arts and crafts are being nurtured through Kararakcha and similar sorts of organisations. We only touch the surface of it.
Yeah, that reminded me, actually we touched both the impact of partition on both sides of India.
We did.
For Gujarat and Pakistan on the west, and east with the Bangladesh.
Yes, that's right.
So we actually, what you said, that it's true that it did affect a lot of people, but they are still trying to revive and restore that art and craft.
The level of skill too, and using traditional materials too. Innovation was taking place in some quarters, but that people were not using exclusively modern chemical dyes. They were still using traditional dyeing techniques.
Yeah, actually the innovation is happening by bringing back the tradition.
Yes, yeah,
because
that's true.
We did lose that tradition.
Yeah.
We went into chemical dye, for example, like you said. We have been using for last 30-40 years chemical dyes, but now the revival stage is up. So we are bringing back the. So I was happy to see all those artisans spending so much time on reviving that and sharing that, even with us.
Well, and that's the other thing that struck me too, that it wasn't just with us as passers-by, but many of them had other museums that they were creating so as to collect key examples of work, but that they were open to their national design students, that there were also measures being taken to not just locally encourage it but internationally do so, and to get design or others interested in textiles to come and spend short periods of time working with and observing, so that it was impressive.
So during your journey, did you manage to understand in depth of any aspect of a specific, if you take, for example, dyeing, when you met the artisans or the master artisans, were they happy to share that?
Oh, absolutely. And I hadn't ever appreciated really the complexity of a dyeing process and multiple dyings, nor the planning that is required. but even the skills just in creating the blocks, the printing blocks, and I've been aware of printing blocks as such, but to actually go to a village and see a gentleman making that, and the variety that he had, because of his understanding of the dyeing process that was going to be involved, and that these teams could be working at some considerable distance from each other, a digital activity of a kind in some ways, but no, so that was fascinating. I learned a great deal because I've never been a practitioner, as a couple of our travelling companions were and are, of weaving and spinning. So I had lots to learn. I've always enjoyed the end products, and I've had the good fortune to be aware of this in another context in past years. So that was interesting as well. As was food. I mean, we joined queues on a number of occasions because of the popularity of an eating place, and we were well rewarded. Yes,
and we were joined the queues with the local people.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, they were all locals. They weren't. They weren't similar travellers to ourselves. In fact, I don't think there were too many travelling in a similar way to us, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah.
Yes, the accommodation I've already alluded to. I enjoyed it. I was grateful for the variety. It was a way of becoming immersed more and more.
We had beach accommodation, tent on the beach, to the tent in the middle of desert.
Yep, that's right. And we camped in the midst of a bird sanctuary, and that was an exciting day, returning to nature of another kind. To go out into what I thought was a bare paddock, brown earth, scorched earth, look about it, up in Gujarat in the north there. And in the course of a couple of hours to see somewhere of the order of about 22 different birds.
Yes.
I mean, that was
we spent
really
2 hours.
Yeah.
We spent 2 hours looking at birds.
It was just wonderful. And then to see the tree, a stone's throw of where we were sleeping, covered in sleeping and snoozing bats. And then in the afternoon, after travelling a short distance to find ourselves in the Chambrel area, and then to get onto that river.
Yes.
And to see that, and to be there late in the afternoon as the sun was setting. There was something magical about that. And we had a very special afternoon tea with the crocodiles and such like, in too close a proximity for the most part. So there were thrills and spills of varying kinds throughout the entire journey. I also enjoyed the opportunity to locate places like Lucknow in history, and much as a British grandfather, having to really question the impact that the Brits had had. We'd had a very stirring introduction to a recently published book, Era of Darkness.
Yes.
When we were
by
in
Dr.
Litterbury. That was a
Yeah.
chance encounter, and a very timely one in very many ways. I've yet to go to Unity Books and procure a copy of the book, or go to Wellington Library to see if they've got it, and perhaps to encourage them to have it on their shelf. So there were things like that.
Which were not planned.
No, that's good. And well, for me, there are other little gems that were definitely not planned.
and the going to the medical camp.
Ah, yes. After lunch in a Jain temple, and then finding ourselves of a chance encounter because of your, Georgie and Charlie's ability to get alongside local people, and to then find ourselves being invited to a hospital which was sponsored by and supported by
the Jain
community, and to meet a couple of doctors who actually came from that area, and whilst they are now working and living in the States, were spending a month each year coming back to support either an eye camp or whatever the area of medicine was that was being focused on at that time. That too, was invaluable. And you can't put a price on those encounters. that's for sure.
And they took time out to show us.
They were most gracious and hospitable, showing us around, and if they'd had their way, we'd have had a second lunch there. But, you know, it was things like that, you know, reminded me of why, you know, I came back to India and I would return again. Because it's such a vast country with so much to offer. I enjoyed too the opportunities to actually see some of the historic temples. We were not templed out. We just saw a sample which had a presence in that particular area, and whose stories that unfolded just once again took us back into a time and place which, as a New Zealander, we just don't have those opportunities to place ourselves in a context so very different from the one in which we live. Well, I was intrigued by it all. I've always been interested in how things are produced, how things that people use daily in their lives are produced. And whilst I won't mention at this particular point, but you know, just seeing how bells are made, and bells have such a part to play in so much of what is India, you know, dance and music and things like that. I mean, I was intrigued by the Rogan art, and again making that link with the long history of India, its Persian presence, which is being retained. I was fascinated by the lacquerwork, the magic. I mean, for me, it was just
magic
magical.
Unfolding in front of you.
It was, and to think that these were utensils being used, could be used daily, and were virtually immutable, and that you could use these beautiful works of art in your own kitchen and elsewhere. I mean, this journey, I have travelled in India by myself, not for such extended periods, but I enjoyed a small group, and it was a small group. It was a family affair, really, in more ways than one. I really am grateful to both you and Shani, Georgie, for your commitment to your ideals and the principles which underpinned this journey, to the time and effort that you put in, and that the attention that you paid for to our needs, and chai stops were regular, which pleased me greatly.
That was quite easy in Gujarat.
I'm easily pleased in that quarter, but no, it was very thoughtfully, considerately planned. I have no complaints. There isn't anything that I would suggest that you could have done differently. And one of the things about travelling in a group, in a small group too, we all get on, and we did, and enjoyed each other's company and appreciated what each one of us brought to the group, because we all see it through such different eyes, and that's the richness, I think, of travelling with others, is that you see things you'd never have seen otherwise. You'd have been in the same place, hearing the same things, seeing the same things, but it would not necessarily have made the same connection. So that's invaluable, and that just adds a dimension that you never have when you're travelling by yourself. It's lovely to have some of the decisions taken out of your hands, that's for sure. I mean, even the opportunity to travel by train, to fly internally, you know, to go on the tuk-tuks, you know, all of those kinds of things. Hailing down taxis, there's a collective advantage in doing that. But also taking the time out to stroll down, you know, little alleys in Calcutta, having an opportunity to return to Mother Teresa's house of, you know, home of residence. A slightly different place from what I had remembered from being there in the 90s, because now, with her passing, we now have her tomb there, and a small museum, and one getting a real overview of the range of her work and the global impact to be there at a time when there were obviously speakers of many different languages there, quietly reflecting on this extraordinary woman's life and the impact of her and her remarkable group of fellow workers, both the sisters and the brothers, alleviating and impacting on a part of India which is so challenging, that is the poverty and difficulties that many people face. We were also saw the initiatives that were taken by Sewa. Now that was
Seva was in Lucknow.
yes, that's right. So that there wasn't the presumption that this is the only thing that women can do.
Yeah.
There were opportunities that were many and
To supplement the income.
yes, and to provide opportunities of healthcare
Yeah.
and education for their children, opportunities which they themselves may not have had. And that investment not just in the parental needs or realisation of theirs, but the security for their children and a much more promising future than they might ever have had.
Yeah, that we saw very near in Seva, that's true, where the children were having classroom within the compound, and the mothers can sit and do the embroidery.
There,
if their little ones want to join the mothers, and they can be part of the family.
And the sociability for the women themselves too, and that went beyond a village. This was an inter-village and communal activity. We saw that too with the New Zealand influence through Freeset, the work that they had done, and just a short distance really from Mother Teresa's. But we also were introduced to historic and philosophical changing people of India. Mahatma Gandhi, we went just outside of Ahmedabad there. So the
Stepwells in Gujarat.
That was just extraordinary, even though I couldn't quite make it down to the bottom, my knee being what it is, but the others came back full of their tales of that. You can see why I began with not being prepared nor being able to actually select a single highlight, because for me there were many and they came in different shapes and forms, and I have no hesitation whatsoever in recommending others to embark on a journey, but being prepared for a journey of discovery for those of us who have had the good fortune to visit such places. You just continue to see below that layer that you thought that you had perhaps had some understanding of, to actually peel back that other layer and to see that below it is a layer, and below that yet another layer. It's a steep learning curve, yes it is. And as a relatively experienced traveller, it was great to be back in that setting. But one of the things that I was really appreciative was the quality of the driving, and it's no mean task.
No.
It takes real skill
and patience.
And patience. And we, as a group, had no driver that any of us could actually fault.
That's true.
And they were particularly good. The first experience with the women drivers, the taxi driver. I mean, again, that was another example of homework so well done. And also a trip beginning with a philosophical basis in which it was tended that it should continue. That this was, and it was a journey undertaking to support those who were taking these sorts of initiatives, were providing opportunities. And so I saw it as developmental.
From our point of view, this is the only way we can support them and encourage them to continue with the great work they're doing on the ground. So
we think how appreciated we were.
We had lunch outside in that remote village restaurant with the locals, and they were wondering what we were doing.
You see, now I can imagine with sometimes that I've travelled, a couple of times I'm alluding to, that would have been absolutely disastrous.
Could have been, yeah.
But it wasn't. It didn't have to be.
No.
It was another great experience.
People were so helpful.
They were. And it was great, all the, just appreciating in a local, very busy lunchtime spot, which was frequented, just how they did it to serve them. You know, the many people who are taking their time out for their lunch break, and the sort of, you know, what constitutes lunch,
Yes.
and what your local cafe is really like.
Yeah.